Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Ouroboros podcast. Today, I realize how quickly we're approaching the end of our series. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, yesterday I was at the Ottawa Mystic Market, this time in like Westboro area. Um, So thanks to everyone who came out to that. It's always a pleasure. It was a bit of a windy day, so as usual, held my cards down for dear life. But yeah, it was fun. This upcoming weekend, like next weekend, I guess, I will have the Square Lemon Market on the Saturday, and I'll post details. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it on the screen. If not, it'll be in the description box. So if you're in the area, you can check that out. And then on the Sunday, I'm trying out another new location, I guess, and I'm going to be at the Obscura Tattoo um, Makers Market on Sunday, the 11th. So that'll be fun. I'll be more so focusing on readings there, I think. But yeah, I am looking forward to it. It's going to be a busy one. But yeah, today we are going to be talking about the High Priestess card. We've talked about the High Priestess card a little bit in the past, just in terms of like her connection with other cards, specifically the um, the Empress card, and I guess the Lovers card kind of ties into that whole grouping. So today she's getting her own spot on the podcast. Um, so yeah, if you want to take a look at the card, feel free. You can check it out on my website. If you are watching on YouTube, then I will be putting it on the screen so you can check that out. And I'm just gonna sort of run you through. I've got the color scheme going, a lot of reds, sort of different tones of reds, a little bit of like a purple undertone, um, and greens. There's a lot of like natural foliage. There's a staircase in the back as well. So we're looking at like more specific things. Of course, as I've mentioned, like plants have always been an important part of like symbolism that I wanted to include just because it's like this natural depiction, natural in the sense of like of earth, but also like growing, changing over time. There's like cycles and seasons to it. So I feel like that's really a fantastic image to incorporate with the cards. But yeah, in the background of the High Priestess card that I've created, there's this sort of marble staircase, and just in front of that, of course, we've got the leaves. We've got a flamenco dancer, which I'm excited to explain a little more about that choice. And then most largely on the page are a couple of pomegranates. And I was so happy to find these because I feel like they are such a good representation of the High Priestess and like the energy that this card brings forward. So we'll get into that. Um, oh my goodness. So the High Priestess card, I could fangirl over for a long time. A High Priestess is one of my all-time favorite cards. Literally every single time that I see this card come out in one of my personal readings, anytime I see this card come out in one of my personal readings, there's like this little twinkle in my spirit. It just I love it. I don't know why specifically. I know other people have different cards that just really speak to them. Um, but yeah, The High Priestess is definitely mine. Um, yeah, I just think it's a super rad card, and we're gonna explain why. So, first of all, the High Priestess, um, there isn't a whole lot of history on the card. It's sort of, we've talked about very briefly, I believe, her connection to the Hierophant. And of course, the Hierophant is the priest, which is a more common uh, image or character job. Oh, I gotta stop filming these so early in the morning. um, but it like the priest is a more common um, character, I guess, that we can like hear and be like, oh yeah, I know who that is. Not necessarily who that is, but like I know the role. A high priestess is lesser known, I want to say. But in like witchy circles and stuff, you might come across some appointed priestesses. Um, and yeah, I I do need to look into how that comes about because I'm very curious. I've probably looked into it before and it's escaped my mind. But the High Priestess card is, we've seen it like previously paired up with the Empress card, and it like further enhances this feminine quality. Um, which, of course, as I've mentioned before, I really don't love the idea of like feminine and masculine energies because I feel like that doesn't say anything. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me personally, and I'm sure there's other people who are just kind of like outside of gender constructs that we have created. So they're not like any spiritual level. Um, so I'm like outside of that, I don't know what that means. Um, but one thing that I guess like is kind of tied into that in like a very odd way is what is considered feminine energy, air quotes, is receptive energy, um, which is like not the way that it's like reduced in our society right now is like not the most empowering, I don't think. But it like more widely and sort of on the spiritual level, receptive energy is like being open to messages from the other side. And like I think some people might refer to this as like psychic downloads or something like that. Um, but it's just basically being in touch with your intuition, being receptive to the feelings, ideas, um, emotions, responses, and taking time to process that, like internalizing, sort of like sifting through that, and then presenting yourself later. Like this idea of taking something in and sitting with it for a while. Um, and that's not like a specifically feminine thing to do, I feel. Well, I mean, outside of socialization, it's not like a specifically feminine thing to do. I don't think like there are several people who would consider their energy to be male who I think are very capable of doing this. But we do see it happen a lot where spirituality is kind of like pushed aside by a lot of men who view it as like sort of a, it's like it's stupid or doesn't make sense, whatever. um spirituality in the sense of like um, reading tarot or doing moon ritual practices or even astrology and stuff. Like a lot of that is poo pooed or like seen as a red flag for for some men, and I think that's like very disappointing because it kind of like feeds back into the receptive idea of, or like the idea of like receptiveness being a feminine trait. And I think that's kind of where it does get kind of sad and a little dangerous, because, you know, that kind of mentality of like, oh, this is for the feminine or this is for girls or whatever, um, especially when that thing is belittled, it's just sexist. It's really not cool. So, yeah, I think like the power of the high priestess is beyond the binary of like masculine and feminine energy. Any card really is. Um, and again, talked about this with the lovers card. There's this cycle of being receptive and sort of what you can do in terms of output. It's like an input output kind of thing, and everybody's got that in every aspect of their life. So the high priestess is no different in terms of that input output thing, um, and sort of the cycling. There's always going to be one, like you're never staying in one spot for too long. So you're moving through these cycles because that is just innately human and innately spiritual to move from one thing to another. Um, and that is also why this card, the High Priestess, is seen as sort of a god of like liminal space, a god, or like associated with goddess like qualities of liminal space or the changing kind of transitional moments in our life. And that is a huge reason why I was just over the moon to see pomegranates that I could use. Because if you are aware of like the symbolic nature of pomegranates, you probably know that they are associated to Persephone in Greek mythology. And Persephone becomes this signifier of duality, because she is simultaneously like a goddess of the underworld, ruling alongside Hades, but also she's associated with spring. So there's like this lightness, this idea of like birth and new beginnings that she has within her. And there's also this like a deep darkness, the heaviness and the finality of endings that come together in her as one individual. She represents both, as well as the cycle from one to another, and I think that's so cool. It's a lot to carry, but I just love this idea of like liminal space. We can also see it as like I think maybe I've even referred to it here as like the gray space, the gray period. Maybe it was with the tower card and that idea of like rebuilding, but there's like sort of a gray area between who you once were and who you are to become. And it feels weird because all of a sudden you have like so much space to kind of move around because you've released a lot of things that aren't necessary anymore. So it kind of feels like empty in a way, but it's because it like opens up so much more opportunity for you. And that's like, that is what liminal space can be in terms of a transition. So the high priestess is just like, she's ruling that. That's if the high priestess comes out, especially with cards that, I mean, we've already talked about that have kind of that association to new beginnings, like the Fool card or the Tower card. That idea of like needing to rebuild something. Um, then this card could very well represent the transition energy. And with that, like I was saying before, that need to be receptive. Um, because like you, you've got to be open to the options that present themselves for you, um, on whatever your new journey or transition is going to look like. So, yeah, with the High Priestess card, like I've said, there's a lot of sort of symbolic nature in terms of her connection to um, the universe, higher power, because there's a lot of like intuitive quality to this card. If she comes out upright, great sign. You're probably very intuitive. There's probably something going on that you are aware of, but might not have words for yet. And that's okay. Again, that's the receptive part, is like sitting back with information. Um, but um, she is seen as sort of like, if we think about it in sort of the medieval context of this hierarchy, God being at the top, or source or creator or the universe, whatever it is, at the top, then the priest and the high priestess are kind of like just underneath. They're receptive to the information that comes from whomever that God may be, however that God may be titled. And that's intuition. Um, Again, receiving those like energetic knowings. But I also wanted to have this symbolized, which is why the staircase is woven into this card. It's sort of that idea of like ascending, ascending information. It's a connection to different sort of levels of understanding, as well as sort of a visual representation of like moving up towards the heavens or down towards earth. Um, it is a connection between levels, and that's what the high priestess represents. Um, but there's so much woven into the high priestess card. We've got um, a really deep understanding of what it means to be ourself as well, especially when she's upright and comes out. This is like, um, you're probably a very self-reflective person, which is sometimes good. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, but um, and there's like a true understanding that you have for who you are, who you want to be, that kind of thing. Um, and there is like a nurturing energy, which is kind of where we uh, touch with the Empress. And like I said, the Empress, interestingly, is sort of an output of that energy. But with the High Priestess, it's an input of the energy that you could be outputting, if that makes sense. Like what you can offer to others, you need to be making sure that you're offering that to yourself for growth, for nurturing. This could be nurturing your inner child. This could be nurturing your present self, in whatever way feels right in any given moment, and that is your ability to truly see who you are, um, like your sort of spiritual self, which is really, really powerful. It's not something that we stay consistent in, which is why, if you're ever going to need to be checked, the high priestess can come out reverse and be like, you seem a little spiritually disconnected. You're not listening to your intuition, blah, 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 blah. Um, there may be a disconnect emotionally as well. So it's if it comes out reverse, this is very much like a check-in, um, and yeah, the emotional aspects of this card, because of course, like when we think of traditional femininity, there is also these connections to emotion. So the feminine is seen as more the emotional side. And that is one of the key reasons I was happy to include the dancer, the flamenco dancer, in this card. And of course, flamenco has like a lot of different um, sort of things that feed into it, but it is a dance that's commonly seen through the culture of Spain. I know there's some like Romani influence as well, which is very like cool to have incorporated. Um, but yeah, Moorish, Jewish. There's a few others I feel that I'm missing, but flamenco dance is a very colorful, very um, intuitive in some ways dance form. And above all, it is incredibly expressive. It's like you'll see the emotional experience on the dancers' faces as they're dancing. Joy, um, like frustration. Maybe it's waves of oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time explaining this, but it is a performance of um, it's a performance that is meant to capture the flow of life and overcoming obstacles and adversity, um, and it's very much like a movement relationship with the human experience. And I thought that was like absolutely incredible. And it kind of links to the physical aspects of our spiritual experience as well. Um, like any information that we may receive on a spiritual level, we kind of like embody that. Um, and with new information, there's these transitions and stuff. So it's sort of an opportunity and a welcoming to express yourself through change, because there's a lot of strength and beauty to that. Uh, and I think even on like a really, really minute level, the transitions that we have between emotions, and even the understanding that emotions like anger and happiness can exist simultaneously within ourselves because we are like emotionally vast enough to hold both at the same time. That is sort of like a liminal space representation as well. It's kind of like a mind-blowing card when you really start looking at all the tiny ways you go through transitions. And that can be extraordinarily hard for people. Um, so yeah, like I said, if this card appears upright in your reading, you're probably very connected to your intuition. This is an encouragement to like really inspect what that means. You might be going through a transition. It's an awareness of the liminal space in sort of this timeline that you're moving through. It's your allowance to be receptive to information, to basically anything. And it's an allowance to show that nurturing for yourself as well. Um, in reverse, this is a call to action for you of how are you denying yourself the things that could be there when the card is upright. So take care of yourself. But that concludes the High Priestess card. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'm gonna have to um, not yawn so much through future episodes. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this episode. I look forward to finishing up the series. And if you are in the Ottawa Gatineau area, then I invite you to come out for a reading either Saturday or Sunday next week. Again, the details will be in the description box below, or associated to this podcast. So feel free to check that out. And I will see you then. Thanks. Bye.